Today, I want to talk about the think box versus play box approach. And this is a mental game strategy that I took from a book called Every Shot Must Have a Purpose, which is one of the best mental game books I've ever read. It's actually from the book from the world of golf, but there's so many applications to it that can apply to baseball and specifically pitching. And one of those is this mental game strategy. So what's the problem? Many pitchers struggle with overthinking on the mound. I work with a lot of them, and they almost always say like when they're struggle, the first thing they start to do is overthink, and their mind starts racing. They start to get internal about things, and so what happens is this basically leads to a disruption in their mechanics. They create a lot. They start to hold a lot more tension, and they start to hesitate as they overthink, and this leads to loss of velo, loss of command. Their mind is so mentally cluttered, and they never really get into that flow state or in the zone state that a lot of high level athletes will talk about being in when they perform at their best. And typically, these types of situations occur under pressure. And since baseball is a game of pressure, and when you're on the mound, all the eyes are on you, all the pressure's on you really to deliver a pitch and execute. It's pretty common for pitchers to fall into this trap. And so, what's the solution to this? One of the solutions that I found is this concept of think box versus play box. And really, it just is a framework to help us separate from when is it okay to be analytical and to think on the mound or in baseball and when we're pitching, and then when should we be in this performance mode where we're not necessarily thinking? Okay, it doesn't mean that we're not thinking. Okay, we're still aware of our surroundings, we're aware of the situation and things going on around us, but we trust ourselves completely, and we're not planning, we're not overthinking, we're not over analytical, but instead we're just kind of on athletic autopilot, as I like to call it, where we're just out of our own way. We're performing at a high level. We trust ourselves. We trust our preparation. We're not holding any tension, and we're just going out there and competing and playing our best. And so the think box, play box is one of those things that can really help with that. So what is it? Well, think of the box and play box as kind of these two different rooms or two different mental states that we could be in, and we really need to have both of them in order to play well. But it's when they start to merge together that we get into trouble. And so the first one is the think box, and this is when we're off the mound, and this is where analysis occurs. So this is where we're assessing the situation, whether it's count, batter, where the runner's at, where we can receive and process signs related to the game and formulate our strategy. So don't necessarily think, hey, I'm taking my pitch like I'm thinking about the pitch call necessarily, but more of, oh, first and third, what play are we running in order to minimize or to handle the situation, or oh, it's a bunt situation. What's my responsibility? That's more what I'm talking about here when we talk about receiving and process signs related to the game. Mental and mechanical adjustments. Maybe we're missing up and arm side consistently, and we know we have some sort of cue or thought that we go to help us to fix that we're familiar with. That's what we can do in the think box. And then in the think box is also where we can kind of go to our breath or some sort of routine where we can release any tension that we're holding. But think box is in broader terms is just where is analytical, and it's where we're thinking about maybe our body or the situation and what we need to do. The play box is when we're actually on the rubber, and this is where we rely completely on feel and instincts in order to be successful. And so when guys are playing their best, they are they're not worried about things when they're in the play box. They're just going out there and competing. They're not thinking about mechanics. They're not worried about decision making. They're only focused on their target. They completely trust their training, and they just execute without hesitation. They're not worried about anything. They're not worried about things that are happening. And even if bad things are happening, maybe they just walked a guy, but in the play box, it's no big deal. Okay, they're just right back onto being in the moment and relying on their training and doing what they need to do in order to be successful. And so, really, once we make a decision in the think box and we're ready to go, as soon as we get to the play box, it's commit and deliver the pitch. Okay, commit to the pitch, whatever it might be. fastball, what's the location, fastball in, and then that's all we're focused on. Okay, it's our target. We're focused on our target and delivering it. And it really doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. When it comes to the play box, there's different mentalities that people can have or that the pitchers might have. I would say for the vast majority of pitchers, it's grip and rip. That was me when I was throwing at my best. I was throwing it as hard as I could at the target and just trusting it and letting it go where it needed to go. That's different than overthrowing. Some guys try too hard, and that can be kind of an unhelpful mindset that pitchers can get into. But when they're in the play box and performing well, they're still trying to throw. They're still throwing hard. It's just more of a controlled aggression, if that makes sense. Clayton Kershaw would talk about that too, how when he was throwing his best, he was just throwing it as hard as he could at the glove and just trusting that whatever happened happened and that good things would happen if he just committed to that. There's other guys they're a little bit more free spirited. They might be humming a song while they're pitching. They're just kind of lighthearted and more carefree. I was not that way, but some guys can be that way. Some guys might see the ball being delivered before it happens. They visualize it actually going from their hand to the glove. Some guys, they'll describe it as hearing the target speaking to them. Okay, these are two other mindsets that I wasn't really as familiar with. It wasn't something that really worked for me as well. I was more, like I said, I was more in that grip and rip type mindset. But there's different mentalities that pitchers can have, and ultimately, what's most important in all of this is you got to figure out what mindset works for you, and that just takes time and practice and experience. Okay, I tried all of these before I really settled on this first one. Okay. And I even had different variations of grip and rip that I tried, right? I had some where I was like super angry at the world, right? I had some where I was, more of that controlled aggression. I found out that controlled aggression was kind of the one that worked for me. So that really just takes time and effort and experience and reflection to know which one it is for you. But just know that there's different mentalities for different pitchers, and you just need to figure out which one works for you. So then how do we transition? How do we transition from, this idea of thinking, analysis, and, maybe not so much worry, but thinking more, how do we go from this thinking mindset to this playing mindset where we're just going out there and competing and playing the game? And so really we have to have some sort of transition line that I like to think about. And for most of us, that's just going to be when we step on the rubber. Okay, when we step on the mound, even that physical act of stepping onto the rubber, stepping on the mound becomes a trigger to switch mental states from this idea of analysis to this idea of trusting, feel, instincts, and competing. And if we can transition from this idea of from think box to play box, that takes care of it prevents that paralysis by analysis, that second guessing, worrying about mechanical adjustments during the delivery, and really losing our rhythm and tempo and flow of the game. And so, how do we implement it? Okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. We have to have a process for going from thinking to playing. And so, for me, or for the vast majority of pitchers that I've worked with and I've seen implement this type of strategy. Okay, the first thing is they need to have a routine. So there needs to be some sort of specific sequence that you follow that takes you from think box um, to play box. And a lot of times there's a routine that every player kind of follows, and it usually involves going to their breath, right? So getting connected to their breath and having some sort of physical action or physical anchor that helps them transition. And so before you step on the rubber, let's talk about that physical anchor side. So on the physical anchor side, before you step on the rubber, find some sort of physical action that switches you from thinking mode to playing mode. For me, as I stepped on the rubber, I would swipe some dirt off of it, and then I would extend my arms. So it's just kind of like this way of kind of releasing the tension in my shoulders, and then I would step on the rubber and I was ready to go. Okay, but that's what worked for me. I would swipe the dirt off the rubber just to think about swiping away the last pitch. I would extend my arms and then bring them to my chest just as a way to relax my shoulders and relax my posture. Other guys will take their hat and put it back on, right? It's just like this simple way of turning it off, putting it back on. Okay, and now we're back into play mode. I think that this is especially useful between at bats, or maybe something bad just happened. You just walked a guy, you just gave up a hit, or maybe it's a way of keeping you um, fully engaged after you mowed down the first two hitters. A lot of times guys will get the first two outs, and then what happens? They relax. And so if you do the same thing between at bats, it just keeps you engaged, keeps you in the present moment, whether the thing that happened before you was good or bad, right? We still want to stay in that present moment where we are um where we're still in that attack mode, in that play box, regardless of the situation, and not overthinking and starting to fall into analysis mode. But the thing is you really just need to practice this. So once you figure out what that physical anchor is, and you know that you need to go to your breath, okay, then it comes down to practice. And I think a lot of guys miss this. They don't practice it during their pens enough. And then when they do get to the game, then they aren't good at going to that routine. And so, how can you do this? Well, when you're throwing your bullpens, a lot of times guys will, the first part of the pen, they're kind of finding their shapes. They're working on some things. They're trying to figure out like, hey, maybe I'm going to work on my curveball today or my changeup or make some sort of mechanical adjustment. And then they always finish with a couple of hitters and they'll simulate some batters. And I think that's the perfect time to also implement your routines or practice your routines. So they might say, hey, let's, it's classic, everyone does it. Let's go runner at third, one out, we need to get a strikeout, something like that. And in that situation in a game, a lot of guys are going to be really sped up, and then that would be the perfect time to kind of go to that routine to help them work through that and go from not overanalyzing the situation to just going out there and competing and trusting. And so that's the perfect time to also practicing your pins. That way, when you do get in that situation, you're prepared for it in a game. And so I think it's really important that we practice it, during those simulated hitters times or those simulated sequences in the pen. And then number four is just responding to tension. So, like I said, I think that the whole physical anchor thing can be anytime something maybe get, squeezed on a call or between at bats. But a lot of times when those things happen, a walk or getting squeezed on a call, give up a hit. Okay, a lot of players have a natural tendency to respond with tension, and anytime we have tension, that's when we start to lose our mechanics. We lose our feel for the baseball. We start to throw slower. We lose command, and we start overthinking things in order to kind of make up for it. And so that's when we need to really go to that routine where we're going to our breath, going to our physical anchors to help kind of release us from that bad juju, if you will, and get back to what we need to focus on in the moment. And so for everyone that's a little bit different, I'll tell some guys to take a lap around the mound. Ball flips is a really good one that I like, where you literally just take the ball and you flip it up and down a few times. And it's one of those things that's really easy to do, but it requires just enough concentration to actually watch the ball and catch it, that it kind of gets you back in that present moment. But really, it's whatever your release routine is. And like I said, that's kind of different for everyone. For me, I like to just swipe the dirt for the rubber, extend my arms to just help me relax my shoulders, and I was ready to go again. But again, that takes practice and time and experience to figure out what works well. And then the last thing is just to review afterwards. So as often as you need to, go back and evaluate. And maybe this is even after the game, right? Where or in between innings where you're thinking, okay, how well did I stay in the play box, right? How well did I go to my routine when things started to get sped up on me? In order to and that will kind of help you start to gain awareness of your thoughts and your emotions and how well you're managing them. And then you'll be better prepared for the next time those things occur. You can even do it, even in the middle of an at bat or in the middle of an inning, again, like, oh, am I sped up right now? And if I am, okay, then I need to step off the mound. I need to spend a little time just getting myself back into that we call it green light, or that play mode where I'm just going out and trusting and competing. So then how do we practice? So this kind of goes back into how can we work on this in the bullpen? So when we throw our bullpens, obviously, if you're working on a mechanical change, if you're working on, spin on your breaking ball, something like that, then you're probably not going to be doing a bunch of think box, play box strategies. You're going to be like tinkering, and you'll be more over the mound, I like to call it. But if we're like working on sequences, simulated hitters, situations in bullpens, then we absolutely need to take time to practice that transition going from think to play or going through those release routines to help us stay in the present moment. And one thing that I think can be really helpful in that is just verbalizing your thought process out loud. So what has a tendency to happen, and this can be even good in game too, if it's a big situation and let's say you got runners on second and third and you need a big strikeout or something, maybe got one out and you got to punch out, you got a guy down 0-2 or 1-2. And, a lot of guys really try extra hard in that situation. One of two things tend to happen. They either try extra hard, um, or they say, you know, they're more in like an afraid mode where they'll say, "Ooh, I don't want to hang this breaking pitch because it might get hit. I might give up 2 runs." Okay. Or they go on the flip side and they're like, "Okay, I'm gonna just absolutely bury this thing. I'm gonna make it the nastiest thing ever to miss a barrel." And what happens is, if they're worried about not hanging it, for example, okay, the first thing they'll do is they'll rip their glove side to try and get farther out front. Now their arm's late, they'll sail it, and then they'll leave it middle, and then it gets banged. Where if you know what you're going to do in that situation, which maybe it's throw a slider, okay, if you can think through the process of what you want to see happen and like be very specific about it, you'll be much more in control in that moment. So think of this two approaches to the same situation. Okay, one of it is, oh, I really don't want to hang this thing because I don't want it to get hit, so I'm gonna make this thing super nasty and bury it. Okay. And really, I want you to focus on hey, I don't want to hang this, right? Because I don't want to get hit. Or think if I took this approach, I'm going to start this slider in the middle bottom part of the zone. It's going to break late and move down and off the plate to miss the hitter's barrel. Okay. Which one is more in control in the situation? Which one's more focused on what we want to see happen, right? And which one's probably going to be more successful? I would say it's this. And so, really verbalizing your thought process or really being clear in your mind of what you want to see, and then not trying to deviate from that or try extra hard to make it happen is going to make you more successful. And so, you can practice that in your pen, right? And you can even say it out loud in your pen just to help you kind of maintain that process and practice that process. Um, so that way you'll be more prepared for it in game. Okay. And then, once you have an idea of what you want to do, take a deep breath, step on the rubber, and then execute with a quiet mind. How do we implement this in the game? Honestly, it kind of really just works the exact same thing that we mentioned. So we have our pre-pitch routine. That's kind of our think box, or even pre-hitter routine. For me, I kind of had like a between hitter routine, and then during the hitter, I was just like, let's go, let's work. Not really spending much time thinking, unless I got kind of lost it. I was maybe down 2-0 or 3-0, right? And I need to kind of regain composure. But otherwise, I was just going. Um, and then, over time, reflect, see what works, track your success in a pitching journal. That can be helpful. But really, that's the whole think box, play box is really just helping us kind of separate from, okay, when do I need to be in thinking mode? When do I need to be in play mode? And for the majority of pitchers, right, they're most successful, or actually for all pitchers are more successful when they're in that play mode, and they just need to know, okay, how do I go from think mode? When do I need to be there? And then when do I need to be in play mode? And how do I get there? Just some final thoughts here. We have a lot of decisions to make when we're on the mound, pitch, you know, am I going to pick? Am I not going to pick? And we really never know in baseball if we've made the right decision. But we do have to learn how to stick with the decisions that we've made. So I know a lot of high school guys probably aren't calling pitches. Even in college, they're probably not calling pitches. But we still have to trust the pitches that are called and trust the decisions that are made. So how can we learn how to stick with those decisions once they've been made? And that's really just living in the play box. And so that's why it's important. And more thoughts on the play box. The play box is not the place to second guess pitch selection, target, or mechanics. When you're on the rubber, and if you're thinking about, ooh, should we throw this pitch? Should we not? Right? Ooh, should I throw it to this spot? Should I not? Am I in the good spot mechanically? Ooh, what's my glove side doing? What's my lower half doing? If we're thinking about those things, we're going to be in trouble because we're not fully trusting ourselves and what we need to do in that moment. And that's when we're not going to be successful. Then the last thing is being successful on the mound requires rhythm. Okay, we can all think of that time when we've thrown really well, probably had a really good rhythm, and things were just coming easy. We weren't thinking of much. And so, if we want to be successful, if we want to find that rhythm, a lot of times we'll find it by slowing down the mental and then speeding up the physical. All right. We're not wasting time between pitches. We're not taking a ton of time between pitches because the more time we spend between pitches, a lot of times that's when that thought can creep in. And when thought creeps in, tension creeps in. And when tension creeps in, bad things tend to happen. Okay. If you look at a lot of the best pitchers tend to work the fastest. And so the reason they work fast is because they want that rhythm. And when they're in that rhythm, it's easy and they're in that flow state. They're in the zone. They're staying out of their own way and they're just going out and competing because they're living in the play box, which is exactly what we want. And so, really, when you're on the mound, decide what you're going to throw. A lot of times that decision's made for you. And then literally just commit to it and deliver it. It's as simple as that. And so, my challenge for you guys would be just to find ways to practice this. So practice think box, play box. And then when you're getting in the game, is okay, am I in thinking mode or am I in play mode? And then use these strategies to help separate those two because both are important and both have their time and place. But be aware of what your thoughts are doing and how they're impacting your ability to play or to compete. And just remember that we're at our best when we're living in this play box. And so we want to spend as much time there as we can. And we really want to make sure that we're staying there when we're on the rubber and we're not in this thinking analytic mode when we're on the rubber, because that's when bad things start to happen. So I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. But my challenge for you would be give this a try and let me know how it goes.